So again, as I said, brothers, it's my privilege to be here tonight to share with you all. As I mentioned before, I feel like I have strong ties here to the member community as I'm a part of the Gardner clan. My wife, I'm married to Melinda. We've been married 26 years, just celebrated our 26th anniversary yesterday. And not only that, as a family physician, one of the things that's always been my goal, as I mentioned before, is to be able to share good, sound information with my brothers, with other African-American men. And as I mentioned before, please make sure, and I'm glad you're recording this, to share this information with other people that you know, family members, especially the younger guys, because what I'm going to share tonight is going to be some really good information as well as some biblical information that talks about healing. So we're going to jump right into it. The name of my topic is Conquering Cancer. Conquering Cancer. And you guys can follow along, as I mentioned before. If you have any questions, just raise your hand, I'll answer your question. Don't feel like you have to wait to the end of the presentation. Right, so my objective tonight is to talk about important cancers affecting men in the year 2022. Give an overview of strategies for identifying some of the common cancers, and we're primarily going to talk tonight about prostate cancer and colon cancer, because those are the two main ones that affect our community. We'll talk a little bit about tips for cancer prevention. I may spend a little bit more time on that because not only do we want to learn how to treat cancer, ideally we want to be able to prevent it. And there's a lot of good research out there on things you can do in your lifestyle to prevent cancer. And then I'm going to finish up highlighting some biblical principles for conquering cancer. So 1 in 3 men at some point in their life will develop some sort of cancer. 1 in 3. Think about that. That's 33% of all men living in our country will develop some type of cancer. And as you can see there, 20% of black or white men will die of some form of cancer. So this is a very, very, very important topic. Cancer affects all of our lives. As a matter of fact, as a raise of hands, I bet you everyone in here knows someone who has dealt with some sort of cancer. You know, I have it in my family. You have it in your family. Most families have to deal with cancer. The other reason why this is an important topic is because there's what's called a racial disparity when it comes to certain types of cancer, as well as deaths from cancer. For instance, black men are more likely to die from colon cancer, prostate cancer, and stomach cancer. And I'll talk a little bit more about why I think that's the case. So it's even more imperative for us as the African American community to understand cancer, its impacts, and also how we can prevent cancer. So I always get this question: what causes most cancers? The long and short of it is that we don't completely understand what causes most cancers, but we believe there's a couple of factors that are important. One are genetics. Right? Cancers tend to run in families in certain cases. 2, your environment. So you may be exposed to something that may be able to cause cancer and not be aware of it in your environment. And then a big one is lifestyle. So there's certain things that we can do in our lifestyle that can put us at a higher risk of cancer. So if someone is a smoker, what cancer does a smoker most likely have a higher risk of? Any ideas? Lung, exactly. Because we know that lung cancer is what's called a carcinogen. It has the potential to cause cancer. Sun exposure. So in Caucasians, sun exposure puts them at a higher risk for skin cancer. It doesn't tend to happen as much in African Americans. But this is the key. I want you to think about this. 40% of all cancers, I'll say it again, 40% of all cancers are preventable. You can do something about it to prevent it. 40%. Right, so we're going to talk about, again, we're going to focus on prostate cancer and colon cancer. So let's talk a little bit about prostate cancer. It's the most common cancer diagnosed among men living in South Carolina. Most common cancer. And the second most common cause of cancer death among men living in South Carolina. So it is very, very common. In my practice, it's one of the more common cancers that I identified through a common blood test called a PSA test, and we'll talk more about that The other thing that's really, really important about this, as I mentioned before, there is a racial disparity in deaths from prostate cancer. So black men are 3 times more likely than white men to die from prostate cancer. And there's some reasons why we think that may be. We think some of it may be genetics. Some of it may be being able to go to the doctor to get tested. There's other studies that suggest that we tend to have more aggressive types of prostate cancer compared to other racial groups. So there is that difference. So it's in our interest to make sure that we understand prostate cancer as black men. Here are some common risk factors here. Age. The older you are, you're at more higher risk for developing prostate cancer. So a 30-year-old is much less likely to get prostate cancer compared to, say, a 60-year-old. Age plays a role. Being African American, as I mentioned to you, is a part of it. Family history and genetics. So there's a gentleman that I take care of, and I highlighted him in a video that I did with him. He had prostate cancer, and so I began to ask him about his family history. His dad had prostate cancer, but went to the doctor late. It was caught late, and he ended up dying from it. He has 5 brothers. All 5 brothers have been diagnosed with prostate cancer within a couple of years of each other. So obviously there's some genetics and environment involved in that, which is why you need to know your family history. So again, it makes a difference. Here's another one. Large amounts of red meat, bacon, hot dogs, cold cuts. If that's a lot in your diet, it is actually a risk factor. Eating a lot of grilled foods. For veterans out there that were in the Vietnam era, Agent Orange has been linked to prostate cancer, okay? Agent Orange, exposure. So if you're a veteran in that era and you were exposed, you need to make sure that you talk to the VA doctors about that. In fact, I have a few of my patients who actually have a service connection because they were in that era, got exposed, and now they're dealing with prostate cancer. Here's another one that we don't often think about. This is a risk factor we just found out about, high blood pressure. High blood pressure, believe it or not, is a risk factor for prostate cancer. And that's very prevalent among the African American population, which is one reason why I think that it's more common, is hypertension. You may be asking yourself, well, how does hypertension relate to prostate cancer? Well, the theory is that there's a hormone called testosterone. And testosterone levels and those hormonal levels can affect your blood pressure. So we think there may be a link between those two. Don't know for sure, but again, it is one of those risk factors that you have to keep in mind. And then, of course, pesticide exposure, if you have a job or worked in an area where you were exposed. Yes, sir, question.
I see you got eating a lot of grilled food. Can you tell me how does that affect? You would think if fried foods would be the common enemy and grilled foods will be on the latter part of it. So
yeah, that's a great question. So the question is, why is grilled foods up there? Well, this is the reason why. And it really has to do how you grill your food. So when you grill food, you know, I remember growing up where if you didn't have a lot of burn on those ribs, you didn't really grill those ribs, right? Well, that burn part and the more you cook that meat, the smoke, the coals, the contents in that coal gets in the meat. So if you eat grilled foods a lot, you're exposing yourself to carcinogens. So even with like steak, believe it or not, now I'm not a real big rare meat guy, but a rare steak is actually less carcinogenic. In other words, carcinogens are cancer-causing things than meats that are grilled. So that's the reason why. That doesn't mean you can't grill. I love to grill, quite a bit, but you just have to limit it. This is the other thing that was really interesting. I looked at a study about grilled foods and carcinogens. If you marinate your food for at least an hour, it significantly cuts down the effects of carcinogens. So well-marinated meat is really, really important. And, stay away from, burning the meat. You just want to make sure there's not a lot of burn on it because that's where the exposure is. That's a great question, yeah. All right, let's move on to colon cancer. Third most common cause of cancer in men living in South Carolina. Look at this, the mortality rate for African American men is 58% higher than white men and almost 113% higher for Hispanic men, right? And again, a lot of that has to do with how quickly is the cancer detected? I'm going to talk a little bit about screening so you guys are aware of it. The later you catch a colon cancer, the more likely that it's going to cause problems. Here's the risk factors for colon cancer. A diet low in fruits and vegetables, a diet high in fat and processed meats, physical inactivity, so the more physically active you are, in other words, you walk regularly or maybe you work out, the more you do that, it actually decreases your risk of cancer, colon cancer. Obesity, alcohol consumption, smoking, which can cause a variety of cancers. A family history of colon cancer or polyps. So if you have a family history of polyps, say your dad had it, your mom had it, you have brothers that have it, then you are actually at a higher risk, and that gets back to the genetics, right? And then lastly, inflammatory bowel disease. What that is, that's certain medical conditions. They're not as common, but they can occur. One's called Crohn's disease. The other one's called ulcerative colitis. Those are conditions that are usually diagnosed when you're younger, but it causes inflammation in the colon. So those people have to be screened more often because of that. I want you guys to look at this slide here. So this is a cancer disparity slide looking at data in South Carolina. Top row, gold bar is African American men. That teal blue is a white man, and the bottom one is Hispanic men. And as you can see across the three major cancers, lung cancer, prostate cancer, and colorectal cancer, we have higher death rates in all three of those categories. Remember I said 40% of these are preventable. So there's things that we can do to not be that kind of statistic, and we'll go over that in a few minutes. Stop right here. Any other questions where I've gone through thus far? Okay. All right, who is this, guys? That's James Brown, that's Jackie Robinson, right? Black Panther. Chadwick Boseman. Yeah. Where's Chadwick Boseman from?
South Carolina.
South Carolina. What part of South? What part? Anderson County. He's from Anderson, South Carolina, born and raised, right? And as you guys know, or you may not know, you know he died very young. He was 43. Anybody know what he died of?
Colon cancer.
Cancer. You know what type? Colon cancer. Colon cancer. So at age, I think in his early 40s, he was diagnosed with colon cancer at stage 4 colon cancer around age 41, which means he had developed a polyp, because it takes a while for these things to develop, probably in his 30s. So I was kind of looking back at this because, I mean, in preparing for this presentation, and it turns out that there are hot spots in our country for the early development of colon cancer. That means individuals who develop colon cancer before the age of 45. So most people who develop it usually develop it within the 5th or 6th decade, 7th decade. So 50s, 60s, 70s. That's when most people develop it. It's very rare to have stage 4 colon cancer at 41, 42 years of age. So in 2020, this is hot off the press, they did studies to see where are there areas where people are getting colon cancer early in the country. So the sort of the light bluish is men who develop colon cancer early. The dark blue is women, and then the red is a combination of both. Okay, 24 counties in South Carolina are considered hot spots, meaning 24 counties in our state, there are a higher number of individuals, this is across all races, that are getting colon cancer very early. One of those counties is Anderson County, which is the same county that he was born and raised in. Another county is Sumter County. Sumter County is on that list. So I bring that up, and we're going to talk about screening, because when I saw it, I was like, I had to tell my brothers, y'all got to get screened. We don't know, we have no idea why this is. They just found it out 2 years ago. Now they're trying to research why it is. It's probably environment, it's probably genetics, and maybe some lifestyle, but the reality is there's some hot spots. And I'm almost sure Chadwick Boseman didn't know that and probably got screened. In fact, at his age, his doctor would not even told him to get screened for colon cancer because he was only 40-something years old when he was screened. So what happened is it probably got caught later in life, later in the process, and unfortunately he passed away from it. Okay. So let's move on to screening. So we know the problem. We know it's there. We know colon cancer, prostate cancer is more common among African American men. There's that disparity. But what are we going to do about it? One of the keys to managing and dealing with cancer is screening, and screening early, and knowing what the rules are or guidelines are for screening. We're going to go over that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about prostate cancer screening, and then we're going to talk about colon cancer screening. So the American Cancer Society, and it gets a little tricky here, but I'm going to try to make sure we keep it real straightforward, said that a doctor and the patient needs to make an informed decision about when to get screened. And the reason why they have this recommendation is that the one good thing about prostate cancer, not saying there's anything good about any cancer, is that it is very slow growing, which means there's a large proportion of men in general, regardless of their race, who will die with prostate cancer, not from prostate cancer. In other words, you did an autopsy on them, they may have had it, but they had heart disease or they had a stroke or whatever else caused them to die from it. So because of that, there's a lot of controversy on screening. In other words, should we be screening as early? And a lot of the governing bodies are having a hard time figuring out. But in general, there's 3 age categories that they recommend. One is at age 50. So at age 50, men who are of average risk, in other words, you don't have a family history of it, or other genetic problems that can cause you increased risk, then at age 50, you should discuss starting prostate cancer screening. The other is age 45. So if you're an African American man, your screening drops down to age 45 because just that fact makes you at a higher risk. Or if you've got a family history of it. When it says first degree relative, that means a father or brother who was diagnosed with prostate cancer at an early age, younger than age 65. So remember I was telling you the story about my patient who had 5 brothers that had prostate cancer. Well, he's an individual who had to be screened earlier because it's in his family. Age 40 is that which is even higher risk, is that if you have more than one first degree relative, in other words, say you have 2 brothers, or your father and your brother who have a history of prostate cancer, you need to start screening at age 40. So it's 50, 45, or 40, depending on what your risk is. Now, the key is you got to know your family history, right? Because if you don't know, you may have a brother or father who has it, and then you would have to be screened earlier. So that's why I want to encourage you, make sure that you know your family history, make sure your siblings know your family history, make sure your sons know about your family history, share that information. Unfortunately, there's a lot of cases where I speak to men, and you know how we are. A lot of times we just keep things in internally, don't talk to people about it. That's just kind of how we do things. I relate, I understand, but if we don't let our family members know about the family history, then we could literally be saving someone's life by making sure we know what our family history is. All right, now, if you have a screening and there's no prostate cancer found on the screening, it's called a PSA test. That's a blood test, prostate-specific antigen test. If you have one, say you're African American, you start screening at age 45, and your PSA is normal, meaning less than 2.5, you can screen every other year. That's the recommendation that they mentioned. If your PSA is greater than 2.5 at any point after that age, then you should get screened every year at that point. Again, discuss that with your doctor. Now, I'm very, very aggressive with screening because 95% of my practice is African American, and I have a lot of guys that I see, being an African American male, and I have some of my patients who have no idea what their family history is. So I just assume you're at high risk, and I start at age 40. That's what I do because, African American men are at high risk, and I've caught a lot of prostate cancers because of that. So we want to make sure we screen appropriately. Yes.
Question.
Yeah.
You mentioned the blood screening. What about digital? Is one more
Oh, that's a
important
great
than the
question.
other?
Good question. All right. So we're going to talk about the rectal exam because that's what keeps a lot of guys away. I'll tell you guys a quick story about that of how that is. So a little history behind the digital rectal examination. Basically, the digital rectal examination, most of you guys in there probably had it. That's where the doctor sticks his finger in your bottom, feel your prostate. That is because of not fun, but it's one of those things you got to get done when you get the tune-up. So years ago, there was no PSA blood test at all. So the only test we really had to screen for the prostate was to actually feel the prostate to see if there were any nodules or knots on it. And then that would lead the doctor to say, hey, we think you may have prostate cancer. It wasn't the most effective, but that's what we had. So the current guidelines are that you do get the digital rectal examination along with the PSA once a year, but the PSA is much, much more sensitive of tracking that. So in general, if I have a patient who's like, hey doc, I am not doing that, I'll at least do the blood test. And I've had several patients who they just won't do it. As a matter of fact, a couple years ago, I had a guy that saw, he's probably in his probably mid-40s, and I walked in and he was like, doc, I'm coming for my physical. I want everything checked from head to toe. Blood work, whatever you got to do, doc, I'm ready. This is this guy's first visit. And I don't know if his wife told him to come and see me or whatever. Never saw him before. I said, okay, all right. And I said, oh boy, when we get to this rectal exam, we're going to have some problems. I already knew because he was, yeah, I'm ready to go. So I do the heart, lungs, and so I have to go reach over to my cabinet to get the KY jelly and all this stuff to test him. And I could tell he was nervous because he kept talking. And I said, oh boy, here we go. It's about to happen. So I'm reaching over and he's saying, yeah, doc, this. And I said, okay. So I put it down and I said, okay, well, we got to do the rectal exam. This guy immediately, he backed up. He literally standing in the corner of the exam room like, there's no way you get back there. I tried to talk him out of the corner. He wouldn't come out of the corner. I said, listen, just get the blood test. Don't worry about that. I'm not even going to go there with you. And he never had his prostate checked. I believe he may have agreed to the blood work. That was the first and last time I saw that guy. Never saw him again. Never saw him again. And I thought, wow, I hope he's continuing to see another doctor because, you don't want to have fear of that procedure, fear of getting your blood work, be something that 3-4 years later, you got an elevated PSA, then you're really dealing with some things. But that's the reality. Like I say, I always tell my patients, no pain, no gain. You go through a little small little exam, right? You get your blood work, but if it can save your life, it's worth it. The bottom line is, it is recommended. PSA is more important in terms of catching things early. All right, colon cancer screening. Any questions about prostate cancer screening before I move on? I'm glad you brought that up, Greg, because I wasn't thinking about that. All right, so colon cancer screening, let's move on to it. So this actually changed in the past couple of years. It used to be that we would start recommending screening at age 50. They actually pushed it back to age 45 just because, as I mentioned before, unfortunately, colon polyps, colon cancer is becoming more common at younger ages. So if you have average risk, they're saying you start regular screening at age 45. And it can be done with a test that looks for signs of cancer in the stool. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Or a visual test, which is what's called the colonoscopy. That's where you go and you take some medicine to clean out the colon. The night before, you go in, they give you some medicine, sedate you. They look in your colon, they're looking for polyps, right? They're looking for polyps. So that's the way that test works. So for people who are in good health, with a life expectancy greater than 10 years, you should get your colon cancer screening up until age 75. And that's important because I've had patients say, hey, I had my colonoscopy back when I was 50 and they're 65. I'm like, well, you still need to have it because you could develop a polyp in that interim. So it's still important. If you're older than that, 76 to 85, then it's really depends on the conversation between you and your doctor. And this is the reason why. If someone, say, has congestive heart failure, they're really, really sick and they're, say, 81 years old, they have heart issues, it may not be worth the risk of doing a colonoscopy if they've had colonoscopies that were normal before, because the likelihood is that the colon polyp, if it's there, is not likely to cause issues for that person. But if you are a healthy 81-year-old, you know, I have a patient that my oldest patient, he's passed away, but he lived to be 104 years old. Well, you know, so if you're healthy, you still may need to be screened if you're older, depending on your health status. But again, for most people under the age 75, you should be screened. And then after age 85, they recommend that you don't have to get the colonoscopy again. Here's the information on average risk. Okay, so if you have a family history of colorectal cancer, personal history of that inflammatory bowel disease, some genetic syndromes, or if you had radiation treatment, say someone had prostate cancer, but they had to have radiation treatment, those are higher risk individuals. So those would drop down to being screening earlier compared to the average population. Yes,
You
sir.
said the one that have radiation for,
Like sometimes men who have prostate cancer they get radiation
Right.
treatment. So if you get radiation treatment, it is around the area where the colon's at. That puts you at a higher risk. So you may need to be screened earlier or more often based on your family history, or just any kind of radiation.
well, I'm taking radiation now.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. So basically what that means is when you have to look at where you're at in terms of your colon cancer screening. So when you have to get your next one, they at least know, hey, I've had that exposure. So you may not need to wait 10 years out. You may need to have it 3 years, 5 years out.
Or
Make
ASAP.
sure- What's that?
As quick as possible.
Well, not necessarily. Depends on when your last one was.
I don't remember.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. So you may want to, if you don't remember, you may want to look into that and make sure you get that done. What happens is sometimes men who get radiation therapy can cause inflammation in the lower part of the colon. And so radiation exposure puts you at a higher risk for that over time. So you definitely want to make sure you get that done. Even regardless of the radiation therapy, if you don't know when you've last had one, it's a good idea for what I'm just showing you guys that you get it done. And you should never assume that, you know, because it's not in your family or, you know, you do a lot, you try to eat right, that you may not have a polyp. I had my funny story here, my first colonoscopy, I'm 53, a couple of years ago. And you know, I've been telling people about colon cancer screening for 20 years. You know, you gotta, you know, we're gonna write you a prescription for this stuff you gotta drink, and you know, you'll be able to deal with it. Don't worry about it. Next day they're gonna, you know, do the colonoscopy. So I go get my kit. I'm like, all right, now it's my turn. So I get my kit, and you know, you guys have had the colonoscopy done before. It's about this much of some magnesium citrate. You have to drink it. It's flavored, right? So I said, okay, well, let me go ahead and mix it up the way they tell me to mix it up. I want to be a good patient. Not all doctors are great patients, so I'm going to do exactly what they tell me to do. So it's like 7 o'clock, I got to start taking this stuff. So I sip about 2 ounces of it. I almost threw up. I said, this is going to be a long night. I got to drink all this stuff. Now I know why my patients don't want to do this. So I'm sipping it. And I said, well, I'm just going to work on my laptop and just deal with it, no problems. So I'm working on my laptop. 30 minutes later, I'm on the toilet. Get back up, run back, get to my laptop, drink a little bit more. 30 minutes later, by the time it was over, I was in the bathroom with my laptop, just hanging out there. So I just gotta let this run its course, right? Get to the next day, do my whole interview. No, I don't have any family history of that. Procedure went well. Doc comes in. I said, how did it go? He said, well, you had a polyp. I'm like, wow. So now my screening is gonna move from every 10 years to every 5 years. But if I said, you know, I do this all the time, I'm a doctor, and yada, 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 I try to take care of myself, I had a polyp. I was shocked, but I had it. He removed it. I'm fine, but I got to be screened earlier. And so the take-home lesson to me was that, hey, this is really, really important. Doesn't matter what you do, who you are, colon cancer screening is important. I could be working and say, I'm so busy taking care of other people, got to do my colonoscopy, try to justify it. that polyp could have turned into a more serious problem. So next time I have to drink the fluid, I'll just have to man up and do it. All right. Okay, so here's the test. Talked a little bit about it. There are several stool-based tests. One is called a fit test. That's where the doctor gets a stool specimen and looks to see if you have blood in your stool. Another one, and you'll probably see commercials about this if you've not already seen them, is a Cologuard test. They're running a lot of commercials on the Cologuard test now. That's a DNA stool-based test. And what it is, it detects DNA in the stool that may indicate you may have a polyp. And then if you have a positive test, then you'd have to go get the colonoscopy because they have to find the polyp and remove it. So I'll do that with my patients. Some of my patients that are older, I will do that. Some of my patients who say, hey, there's no way I'm getting a colonoscopy. I don't want to drink that stuff. I've had patients say, a colonoscopy can cause you to have bowel problems for the rest of your life, whatever. But it allows you to know, hey, if it's positive, you may have something going on and you may need to go ahead and get the colonoscopy. The other two that are visual are called a colonoscopy every 10 years, depending on your risk. And now there's something called a CT colonography, which is what we call a virtual colonoscopy. It's where you go get a CT scan, they give you some medicine that you drink, it lines the lining of your colon, and then they see if you may have a polyp or not. Again, if you have one, you still have to go back and get the colonoscopy because that doesn't treat the problem, it just identifies it. So for most people, you get the colonoscopy, they can see the issue that's there, remove the polyp, and then screen going forward. In most cases, once they move the polyp, if it's got cancerous potential, once they remove it, then that problem's dealt with. So I'm a big proponent of making sure people get that screening test. Now, both prostate and colon cancer are highly, highly treatable. Just because you have a diagnosis of either one of those, highly treatable. With this caveat, the earlier you catch it, the more likely you're not going to die from it or have a lot of complications. And that's what this slide shows. So if you're diagnosed with stage 1 colon cancer, which means very early you get a colonoscopy, maybe you have a polyp and it's got a small amount of cancer in it, the cure rate is 92%. Stage 4, which means it's moved beyond the colon and it may have gone to other parts of your body, the survival rate is 15%. So when Chadwick Boseman was diagnosed, he already had stage 4 colon cancer. So, the likelihood of him surviving that is very low because once it gets beyond your colon, it goes down. Now look at prostate cancer. If you have stage 1, which means you catch it early, it's in your prostate, the survival rate at 5 years is almost 100%, 98%. Very, very, very high survival rate. So the vast majority of my patients that I've diagnosed with it and then sent it to urology, the vast majority of them do great. They get the treatment they need, and after 5 years, they're doing really well. The one exception that I can think of in the past 10 years is one of my patients who, and this is why early screening is important, who refused to get prostate cancer screening. He basically said, I don't want to know all that, doc. And I took care of this patient for probably 15 years. And he started having back pain, did an exam, he had prostate cancer already gone to his back. We did the test, his PSA was like, normal is less than 2.5, his PSA was like 400 or 500. He went through the treatment at that point, and unfortunately he died from it. But it was really because of late identification, late diagnosis. So again, stage 4, 30% survival. So the bottom line is earlier is better and consistent screening for both of those cancers. Oh, this is a video here. See if you guys can hear this.
Dr. Daniels was watching me for quite a while, and he kept telling me that it was getting larger and larger. So it come to this place where he sent me to Dr. Beasley, and they give me further tests, and they told me I had cancer. Back about 3 months ago, they found the polyp and some tissues. They tried to remove it through regular surgery, but it didn't go through. So I had to go to surgery and I had it removed. Thank God when they removed it, it wasn't cancerous, but everything was good. The surgery went well. I didn't have to have a bag or anything like that. So thank God for everything. I'm well and going strong.
Wonderful, wonderful. So this was a town hall that I did with some with my patients. All four of these guys are my patients, and I brought this one up because the last guy that was talking, he's 60. He came in for a routine checkup, had his physical done with me, always kept his appointments, and I said, hey, it's time for your colonoscopy. He said, oh yeah, I got to do that. And then he has family down in Florida. He missed the colonoscopy that year. Next year I saw him, came in for his physical. Hey, did you have your colonoscopy? No, I didn't. I missed it. I said, hey, we got to get it this year. Went to go get his colonoscopy done. He had about a quarter-size polyp that was flat on this side of his colon. So it was so big they couldn't remove it. Now he said it wasn't cancer, which he was right, but it was a pre-cancer that if that had been there another year or two, that was going to be invasive colon cancer. They went in, they removed that part. He's cancer-free, didn't have to do any chemotherapy. He's doing great. The other gentleman that we showed first, he's 80 years old, and he had an elevated PSA for a couple of years. And I kept telling him, hey, your PSA is going up. We got to make sure we manage this. Eventually, I got an MRI of his prostate that showed he had a cancer in his prostate. And at that point, he was like, okay, I'm going to go and get it checked out. He had 43 treatments of radiation therapy, and his initial PSA, I think, was in the 20s. At his last check, his PSA was less than 0.5. He is cancer-free, doing great, and virtually had no complications from it. So my point is, there are a lot of treatment options out there. And here are the ones. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. If you guys have specific questions, we can look into it. But it's basically either prostate surgery, radiation therapy, brachytherapy is where they put pellets inside of the prostate itself to kill the prostate cancer. One of the other guys on that panel had that, and he's doing fine. Hormonal therapy is usually reserved for men who are older, and it helps to shrink the cancer. I had a patient of mine, he's doing well as well. He had a PSA of 200.
Ooh.
Did the hormonal therapy, and his prostate cancer, his last PSA was 1. And I was concerned about him because it was, again, he hadn't gone to the doctor in some years, but my point is, he did the therapy and he's doing fine. And then for colon cancer, it's usually either colon surgery and or chemotherapy if it's further advanced. All right, let's talk about some prevention. Everybody with me? We doing good? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. All right. Now, this is the part I really want to focus on, which is prevention, because growing research shows that there's several lifestyle changes a person can take to reduce the risk of cancer and or slow its progression, all right? And the way to think about it is a toolbox, right? So I try to be a somewhat halfway handyman around my house. Some things I try to do I probably shouldn't, but I do it anyway. And my wife always gets on me because I'm real notorious for pulling out a tool, fixing something, tools over in the corner, it's there for a couple months. I'm not real good with keeping that organized. But for when it comes to cancer prevention, you got to have the right things in your toolbox. And that's what I'm going to talk about. What are the things you need to have in your toolbox that we know from research will decrease your risk for colon and prostate cancer, and or if you're already dealing with it, it'll even benefit you if you're dealing with that issue. Now, this is a slide here that talks about what's called chemoprevention. And basically what the slide is showing is that if you do some of these things I'm talking about in the toolbox earlier when the cancer is on, so that's more on this side, it's much, much better than when you get to the invasive tumor, which is that picture that's on the my far left. Right. Here's the toolbox. Right? The things I'm mentioning on this toolbox, if you do these things, you're going to reduce your risk. A lot of strong science behind it. I'm not going to go through individual studies, but this is what you need to have. 1, increase the amounts of fruits and vegetables in your diet. Increase the amounts of fruits and vegetables in your diet. God has created fruits and vegetables that have chemicals in it that heal our bodies. And it's amazing when you study out the things that are in there. For example, broccoli. Broccoli is one of the most powerful cancer-fighting vegetables that you can eat. Not only colon and prostate cancer, but a variety of other cancers. Blueberries. They did a study looking at blueberries and strawberries, and they made an extract out of it. They put it in a test tube with prostate cancer cells and studied it, and the extract killed the prostate cancer cells in the test tube. Killed them. Blueberries, strawberries. So you want to do a variety of things, right? A variety of things to add into your diet. And not only it's good for heart disease, a variety of other things. You want to make sure you do fruits and vegetables in the diet. Now, there's been studies looking at consumption of fruits and vegetables in diet by race. Unfortunately, we on the bottom of that list in terms of eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, right? So we got to pick that up. We're eating more fruits and vegetables in our diet. Physical activity. So there was a study looking at physical activity in men who had active prostate cancer. And they found that those men who exercised regularly during their treatment had fewer complications and a higher success of a positive outcome. Because, again, that naturally builds up your immune system, helps your body fight that disease. There's studies that show the more physically active you are, and that doesn't mean you have to go to Gold's Gym, but just being physically active. One day you may cut your yard instead of doing a ride lawnmower, you go out there and push it.
Great.
Or, whatever you need to do. I know you're old. Now, I know that I don't have a lot of land. Now, if you're one of these fellas that live out here on about 10 acres of land, I understand why you're not doing the push. I get it. But my point is, do things to get the heart rate going. Do things to get the heart rate going. Now, the other thing, this is interesting. Maintain a regular intake of green tea or green tea extract. Now, that's not Lipton green tea that you get. I know, I got you. That's not Lipton green tea that you can get from the grocery store. It's real green tea that you brew yourself. And that's available at all the grocery stores. It has an extract in it that helps to fight all kind of cancers, and you add it to your diet. That's why over in Asia, where they do a lot of teas, they have lower rates of certain cancers because of that. So you want to do green tea. And there's products out there of green tea extract. Increase your intake of cruciferous vegetables. You talked about that. That's broccoli, cauliflower. Those are cancer-fighting veggies, so increase that in your diet. There's actually some herbal products out there that have cauliflower and broccoli extract in it because it's such a powerful cancer-fighting properties. And then the last is to increase quercetin levels in your diet. So you ever heard the statement, an apple a day keeps the doctor away? Right. It really is true. So there's a study done over in Scandinavia where they looked at colon cancer and prostate cancer risk. And they basically found that men and women who ate one apple a day, including the skin, because the quercetin, that's a chemical that helps fight cancer, it's in the skin, decreased their risk of those two cancers by 30%. An apple a day. An apple a day. So if you like apples, eat them as much as you can. It's got a lot of healing properties and cancer-fighting properties in it. Yes, sir.
Any kind of
Any
apple?
apple.
Any apple.
Any apple you want to eat, but you got to eat you can't peel the skin off. It's the skin that has the healing properties in it. An apple a day. So it really is true that an apple a day keeps me away. All right. Now, so some of you guys who are busy or say, hey, I'm so busy I can't get all my fruits and vegetables in. There's a product, I actually take this product myself. I offer it at my practice. It's called Juice Plus. You go on the internet, go to Amazon. You can get it on Amazon. For anyone who's really interested in getting it, I'm actually a distributor of it as well. I can probably get it for you at a cheaper rate. I do the gummies. That's just easy for me to do. But it has basically the combination of the veggies and the fruits. Gives you all natural, organic fruits and vegetables, about 20 of them every day. So I know I'm always going to get my broccoli, my kale, any other products in there. When I do 4 gummies for veggies, 4 gummies for fruits. If people don't like gummies, it comes in a pill form as well. And there's been a lot of scientific studies on Juice Plus for a variety of issues, and it seems to be helpful as well. So that's just something that you can do to to supplement yourself. There's 2 more herbals I'm gonna mention. All these, just because Amazon's so common, you can order. This is one, if there's any herbal product that I recommend you look into getting for a variety of reasons, is turmeric. You guys heard of curry foods, curry chicken? So there's a yellow spice in curry foods called curcumin. And it's got natural anti-inflammatory properties, and it turns out that it's got cancer-fighting properties. It's also good for decreasing risk of heart disease. It's also good for arthritis because it decreases inflammation. The key to turmeric, though, is you have to get the right product because it has to be with something called piperine, which comes from black salt. That combination helps it to be absorbed better. So if you don't get the right kind, or even if you say you eat it in your diet, you gotta have a high enough level. So this product is a very, very highly rated one that's there. It's called Turmeric Complex with Bioperin. It's by Primal Harvest. If you Google it, if you go on Amazon, you can order it there. I think it runs 30 days, runs like $35, $40. But in terms of cancer prevention and a variety of other issues, if you can put it in your plan, I would definitely do that. And the other one is resveratrol. Resveratrol comes from grapes. So over in the Mediterranean, what is one thing that they do a lot over in the Mediterranean? Anybody know? They do it almost every meal. Wine. Red wine. And because it has resveratrol in it. So it reduces risk of heart disease, but also has cancer fighting properties. So again, the key is you gotta have to have enough of it. So this product here, by Approved Science, is some resveratrol. It also has another product in it that helps with the absorption. So both of those, you have to have the right product there. So you guys can look that up as well. Now this is one of my favorite slides. So we're gonna talk a little bit about some spiritual principles, and then I'm gonna finish up here. Look at this guy. Individuals who attend church at least once a week are 50% less likely to die from anything compared to those who don't attend church. Think about that. I'm gonna let that soak in. So this is good for your health that you're here right now. Because I promise you, you guys are here. So most of you guys, I know you guys go to church. Because the people who come to this, they come to Sunday service, right? We know that. That's just the way church works, right? 50% less likely, not cancer. I said anything. So there's this huge study that showed that people who attend church regularly have less heart disease, they die less strokes, they die less cancer, a variety of things. And my theory behind it is that, one, when you attend church, church is a community, right? And when you're in a community, communities look out for each other. And so that social interaction helps you in terms of your overall health. Two, when you come to church, you're in the presence of the Lord, right? And that spiritual exercise of prayer, reading his word, singing, all those things actually affect your physical body and allow you to live healthier. Three, people who attend church more regularly have lower rates of depression, anxiety, again, because you lay those things on the Lord. You have brothers and sisters who support you. All those things are important. So not only is it good for you spiritually, it's good for your health to attend once a week, which is basically coming to church every Sunday. So I'm sure the pastor is probably glad I showed this slide. And if you and COVID is you're okay. COVID's at low levels. We got people in my own church. I saw one guy, I'd seen him like 2.5 years. I was like, he had a beard there. I said, man, where you been, man? You know, well, I don't know, COVID. I said, I understand in the short term, but it's time for us to get back to church. You cannot duplicate online the experience of being in church. And again, that study this is talking about going to church, not online. I'm talking about being in a church sanctuary, attending services. Let's encourage everybody to get back in there. Obviously, if you have some special circumstances, we understand that, but we need to be back in church. All right, 3 principles here. Again, a lot of this has some research in it, but I just want to encourage you guys about this. Is the first spiritual principle. So I believe that God has a pathway of healing for everyone, right? The first principle is you have to believe that God is a healer and has a pathway of healing for you. So this talks about how spiritually we need to approach these things. So I am into astrophysics, cosmology, stars, and all that. I like studying that stuff. And there's a couple of guys who've written some interesting books about that, about creation. And I want you to think about this. In the scripture, you guys know Moses, children of Israel, they had the 10 plagues, right? Moses came to the Egyptian Pharaoh and said, let my people go. He said, no, I'm not letting y'all go. Y'all my slaves. I'm making a lot of money off you guys. I'm not letting you go. 10 plagues came. They let the people of Israel go. They went out. Moses was their deliverer, right? After they got delivered, Moses took them in the wilderness. They came to a place called Marah, right? They needed water. It was 3 days they had no water. The water was bitter, is what the scripture says, right? God told Moses got real nervous because the people started murmuring. You brought us out here in this wilderness, we don't have no water. God told Moses to get a stick. You guys know what Moses did? Threw it in the water. He threw it in the water, and the water turned sweet, right? Then God said to them, he said God tested them, right? And what did he say to them? He said, if you follow my commands, right, then the diseases that came on the Egyptians will not come on you, because I am the Lord, your what? Healer. Jehovah Rafika. Jehovah Rapha. Now, as I studied this out, that word Lord means the self-existent eternal God. The self-existent eternal God. And the word in Hebrew for healer is also translated physician. I'm the self-existent God who is your physician. When it talks about self-existent one, and I want you guys to think about it, this is a great place to do this because we're out in the rural area. You can look out, not now, but when it's clear, you can look out, see all the stars, see all of God's creation. There's studies that show that millions of years ago, God spoke creation into existence. And science is now catching up with the Bible and showing that there's 100 million galaxies that were produced when God spoke this world into existence. One of those galaxies is the Milky Way that we live in. In the Milky Way, right, there are millions of stars. The sun is, of course, we know is the main star. And our planet is in what's called a spiral arm on the outside of the galaxy, right? And it's just placed in the right spot. If it's too close to the sun, we burn up. If it's too far out, it gets too cold. So he has not only spoke things into existence, the self-existence God, millions of galaxies, placed us on planet Earth. It's in exactly the right spot. That self-existing God, eternal God, is your physician.
Amen.
That self-existing eternal God is your physician. Think about that. So times when I'm like, man, I got this dilemma, or my patient has one, I'm dealing with something. You can come to me to check it out, but if you got the self-existent eternal God, creator of all heaven, who is your physician, he's got a pathway for you guys to walk in health. Spiritual principle number one. It's just a matter of seeking his wisdom, getting the help, the information you need from the physicians, praying about it, being in a community of believers. Spiritual principle number two. Unlock the power of intercessory prayer as you journey through the healing process, right? Now, the reality is this. When you're dealing with some sort of ailment, be it cancer or any kind of physical ailment, sometimes it can be overwhelming. Sometimes you need people around you to support you. And one of the ways they can do that, and Scripture talks about it in the book of James, 5th chapter, 14th verse. You guys can read it later. It basically says we need to pray for each other so that we may be healed. So if you're dealing with an issue, get people you trust to be praying for you. I have this book called Miracles Today. This guy who was an atheist who is now a theologian wrote it. And he tells this story of a guy who has stage 4 liver cancer in Scandinavia, right? And I bring up Scandinavia because over there, Christianity, belief in God is not prevalent there as it is here. And this guy has stage 4 liver cancer, eyes yellow. They gave this guy 6 months to live. He was a very prominent gentleman, so he had his church praying for him, people in the community, political leaders praying for him. So he went to the doctor. Doctor checks him out and he said, hey, I noticed your eyes aren't as yellow as they were before. So the doctor was shocked. They did another scan on him. His stage 4 liver cancer, completely gone. God healed him of that disease. And he attributed it to the power of intercessory prayer because he had all those people praying for him. So make sure to unlock that. Let people know about that because prayer works. Prayer is powerful. Last one here. And this is something that you guys can study. It's in James, the 5th chapter. I may got those verses wrong. But it talks about what I call divinely ordered prayer. What that is, there's sometimes circumstances where you're dealing with an ailment. Well, the Bible says, if any of you are sick, let them do what? Call the elders of the church, right? It says, anoint them with oil, and the prayer of faith will heal the sick. So my point is this, there may be circumstances where you may need that divinely ordered prayer. Call the elders. That's, of course, the pastor, the leadership of the church, men of faith who believe in God as a healer. Pray over you, anoint you with oil, and you, with your faith and other people believing, can affect healing in your life as well. So those are those 3 principles. So we not only want to do the natural, but we depend on God for the supernatural. And we know as we follow along that pathway that we can walk in health. Amen?
Amen.
Amen. All right. Any more questions? I'm done with my presentation. All right, thank you, brothers. I appreciate it so much. Like I say, make sure to share this information with other people that you know that you love. Because we got to make sure we take care of our health and take care of each other.
That's it.